Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Lights on Data Show. Today, I'm welcoming back a guest who's built a thriving career as a freelance data scientist and is also redefining what it means to work independently in the data space, especially as a parent and entrepreneur. Dimitri Visnadi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George. Good to be back again.
Likewise, Dimitri, I think you're known for your honesty, transparency, practical advice as well. And I remember in our last conversation, we talked about how to break into freelancing as a data scientist. And by the way, if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend that you do. It's going to be a link somewhere here. But this time around, we're diving deeper. Well, we're explore what it really takes to build a sustainable freelancing business, how to find clients, why freelancing works for him, for you, Dimitri, and even how maybe you're experimenting a little bit with new models. And yes, Dimitri also created a course designed to help others do the same as he did. But don't worry, it's not a sales pitch. Where we're here to really unpack those lessons, those failures, the mindset shifts that can help you thrive as a freelance data professional. So right on, let's get into it.
Sure, I'm ready.
So why don't we start with a recap for those that, especially that maybe haven't seen the previous episode where we had you as a guest. What drew you to freelancing in the first place?
I think over the last years I had some time to reflect on this because actually I think everyone will need to unpack their own answer for this. But I think for me it was a simple fact that I graduated with a degree in business in 2013, and afterwards I worked for 4 companies as an employee, and on average I stayed 1.5 years with each of those companies. And when I was basically resigning from my last job, I was thinking, should I apply to another company? What will they ask me in the interview process? Like questions like, how long will you stick with us if you only stay for 1.5 years?
Hmm.
And yeah, I think I had to be honest with myself, and I had this craving of, I don't know, trying myself out to be independent. My last job, my last employment was with a consultancy, so I kind of had this feeling that I could do better, and that basically what drew me to basically bet on myself and yeah, quit my job and start basically from scratch with no clients, and yeah, tried myself as a
Yeah,
freelancer, and fast forward 7 years, I'm still here.
not easy. See, I'm a risk adverse person, so that's the first thing that I'm thinking of. Okay, will I get that income right away to be able to sustain me?
Yeah,
And do you find that your perspectives have changed in any way since we last spoke on the freelancing?
no, not much. I think that I'm still staying with the same principles on how to move into freelancing, who should move into freelancing, a little bit like this. But I think it's probably based on my personality, on my experience. So yeah, that hasn't changed.
So for those that maybe are pondering a similar question as well, should I get into freelancing? What would you say that are maybe the traits or their circumstances that would make somebody more likely to thrive as a freelance professional, especially in the data science or data career overall?
Yeah. There's no straightforward answer. There's always the feeling of, I think the number one question that everyone will ask is, will I make money as a freelancer? Will I be able to get clients as a freelancer? I think that's the number one question, and
Hmm.
you have to know that regardless if you start out from day one or after 7 years, the question will always be, how do I get clients? This question will never stop. So that's something that you have to get familiar with over time. And basically, how to start out or who should start out, I think it depends on personal risk taking, because yes, technically I don't want to hide things like there's a risk involved, because everyone who starts their own business, who's an entrepreneur, who has their own business, they deal with a certain type of risk compared to being an employee, where you just focus on being an employer. You get your steady pay check in, and so there's a difference, and you have to
Hmm.
figure out how deep do you want to go into this freelancing route. And I also believe it's important to assess what's basically life situation are you in. For example, I was basically single. I wasn't a parent at the time. I had basically enough savings that I could say, hey, let's try it out. What's the worst thing that could happen? I
Yeah.
might not get a client after 6 months or after 12 months. And that basically was the time period that I set to myself. And I told myself, hey, let's try it out. If it doesn't work, I will just apply for jobs again, because so far I was always, let's say, pretty successful in getting a full-time job. If you're in that position, in that luxurious position, why not trying it out? That's
Mhm.
usually my mindset.
Yeah, so it was a mitigated risk, right? You
Yeah,
did set yourself that time period, and you gave yourself the chance to try it and
correct.
put it all out. But and yeah, you mentioned the challenge and the question of how do I get those clients? And I know you cover this and more in your course, but
Mhm.
high level, how do you typically get new clients?
I always say freelancers have these four typical channels. The first one are freelancing platforms such as Upwork, Fiverr, and so on. There are different ones. The second one is usually recruiting agencies. So they are
Mm,
usually between the end client and the freelancer, and they basically just try to place the freelancer in the with the end client as a contractor. The third one is your network, people that you know, people that you have worked with, and so on and so forth. And the fourth one is basically the big world of marketing, which could be anything from email marketing to, I don't know, posting on LinkedIn to giving a talk at a conference, doing a podcast, whatever it is. So
right,
high level, these are the four channels.
right. Thank you. Well, so when you started and when we had this conversation the first time, I mean, yes, AI was a thing. Gen AI, not as much, right? It wasn't really building up and the service that we have available to us today. Plus, the market is growing so rapidly, and the types of AI related services that are provided to us. So, as a team of one, do you feel that now, with all these AI capabilities, quote unquote, at your fingertips, do you feel like you're not as alone anymore? That you have a team of, I don't know, bots and services that you can make use of, anywhere from marketing to actually help you with some of the jobs that you're doing?
Yes, definitely, definitely. I mean, it sounds sad when people say that, AI will take jobs. And partially I would say it's true. Before,
Mhm.
when I needed, because I'm data analyst slash data scientist, but I had no skills in data engineering. So sometimes if I need a data engineer, I need to collaborate with another freelancer. If I need someone that is more marketing driven or someone that helps me to look over my presentation for my client, I had to get someone with a different skill. Now I can leverage a lot through those LLM tools that we are familiar with, and
Mhm.
basically get feedback. I often ask them lots of things, and they basically give me lots of things in return. Where before I paid someone else, now I only pay a small subscription.
Right, right. So yeah, that's very interesting, and it's that double-edged sword. So yes, it's taking potential job from somebody. At the same time, you're upskilling yourself, learning how to use these tools, and of course, you also need to know that the results that are given back to you, they're okay. You can vet them, because in the end, it's you on the line and your reputation and how you're engaging with that client, right? So it's still on you.
Again, it's as you said, it's still on me, but at the end, those tools, I mean, in practical terms, they help me to code faster, to help me to code
Right.
better. If I have to, I don't know, sometimes I have a database and I have to query something, and instead of putting so much thought into how do I do that, I just ask it and I get a query, and usually I paste that query, I run it. If I see it gives the result I wanted, hey, I save time. If not, I'll just have to adapt it. But there's already the component of speed that has helped me a lot with it, for example.
Yeah. Does then it also help you not just in the work that you have to deliver for your client, but also on your own personal brand, the marketing aspect, like running your business, basically?
Yes and no. I mean, most of the time when I use tools, let's say like ChatGPT, Claude, and these are the
Mm,
ones that I mostly use. It's again, it's brainstorming. I have an idea, or I want to do something the way. I just want to have someone to get some feedback, and that's probably the one way of using them. I'm not the person that has, for example, my LinkedIn post automated. I don't like that. The only thing I use them for is what I often like is correct my grammar. That's my prompt, and I just paste what I want to write, just make sure that it's corrected. But apart from that, sometimes I ask to get some better ideas when I want to send an email to a
mm,
potential client or a message or something. I just ask it, give me two variations of that, just to get an idea. Because again, I'm not the the best writer, you know. So I think it's more about getting input and ideas, and at the end you pick something that
Yeah.
sounds most natural to you, and you probably adapt it. But yeah, it's this feedback loop that you get so quickly that is so useful, I think.
Did you start creating your own cheat sheet of prompts that you're using that you found
No,
they work well?
no. I always prompt from zero. I'm not very efficient with that, but again, I also don't think that I'm using them as often. Again, the most prompt is probably just to correct my grammar, write me a piece of code,
Right.
and that's it.
Right. Well, I'll do this pitch for you. Maybe something to include in your course in a later
Mhm.
edition. So
We'll think
speaking of
about it.
which, yeah. So speaking of which, the your course for data professionals who want
Yeah,
to become freelancers.
yeah.
What gap did you see in the market that made you want to put it together?
First of all, right after like about 2 years now, I started to post more about my journey as a freelancer on LinkedIn, and I got a lot of people to kind of jump on my post, get into interactions. I started doing some open virtual meetups basically where people can come and basically ask me questions about being a freelancer or being a freelancer in the data space. And all these events kind of helped me to understand that, hey, there are people out there that would love to become a freelancer, but first of all, they don't know anyone. They don't know how life is as a freelancer. They have the typical question of how do I get clients? What are the things that I'm missing out that I should focus on before becoming a freelancer? Some of them are freelancer in the first year, and they just want to hear someone maybe I wouldn't say more experienced, but someone that has learned from a different angle something. Maybe they're missing out something. And yeah, and I got a lot of feedback through that. And then I started out first with a newsletter. Then I figured out that I'm not the person that can write on a weekly basis, lots of content. I didn't want to, again, that's slowly when also ChatGPT arrived. So I thought, no, I will not let ChatGPT write my newsletter for me. So again, the beauty is that it's personal, but I'm
Yeah.
also not a machine. It's not
Yeah.
my, let's say, core business. So that's why I wanted to all be natural. I asked people that if it would be interesting for them if I write a small, let's say, ebook about this topic. And yeah, so I got some people together that basically purchased the ebook, and then slowly the ebook turned to a community. The community turned into an online course. Now it's even more fleshed out web app. So it's an online course, but it's also small tools like, as I mentioned before, one way of getting clients is through recruiters and that they basically help you to get a client. And how do you get to know recruiters? Well, I'm crawling lots of freelancing jobs and contracting projects basically, and I got lots of emails and contact details from those recruiters. So I have this curated
Database.
database and yeah, tools like this that help myself and again like-minded to in their basically in their freelance journey and
Yeah, because
new courses.
like you said, it's one of the first questions that people have and the hurdles,
Yeah,
and at least this one removes that barrier a bit, and
correct.
yeah, it lowers the risk of getting into freelancing.
Yeah,
And yeah, well, I'm so glad that you're sharing that, because there's so many more aspects, right, of being a freelancer and getting into
yeah.
freelancing than this, and anywhere from where do you even start with price points, and what are the expectations, all the logistics, contracts, how should you set yourself up for success in general. And yeah.
And even more important, just to add here, that's basically one of my first chapters. All what you just mentioned are kind of technicalities, but often it's the mindset and the shift. And that's usually part of my first chapter where I put a lot of emphasis on. Because if you think about freelancing, there's the mindset. Again, I'm worried, will I get a job or not? There are so many I don't like them, but there are so many types of online courses or boot camps out there, that promise you the typical sales lines with get, I don't know, 5-digit revenues per
Mm.
month and things like this. And I don't know, maybe that might be true, but I think it's always about that money. And freelancing, for me personally, yes, money is important, but it's a lifestyle business for me. I can
Hmm.
work on my terms. I can work wherever I want. I'm not the person that works at the beach, but if I could, I could if I wanted to. And yeah, and I think that's much more to be able to work with the skills that you have to monetize your own skills that because that's really fulfilling, and I have a lot of pride in that. And so yeah, that's basically what it's all about. So the first sessions or the first chapter also of the course is really about the mindset, about the the research that one can do in order to become a freelancer. I think that's one of the, I think personally, most important parts
Hmm.
of it.
You're right, and I feel it's underrated, and
Yeah.
a lot of people are not really contemplating on that mindset to start with, and how to again set themselves up psychologically, psychically, to make sure that they're thriving in it, and yeah, managing that anxiousness that you might have about the risk or the perceived risk of getting into it. Okay, yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm curious because you probably tried a lot of things. You had a lot of experimentations, trial and error there. Can you share any or one example of something that maybe you tried that didn't work, that you've learned from it in your freelancer career? And Dimitri, I remember you don't like candies, right? You don't like sweets.
I don't like
All right,
candies, I don't eat sweets.
but if you can give us a metaphorical, candy piece of candy with this
Yeah.
advice.
I mean, again, as a freelancer, I try to experiment all the time. Experiments are basically the way I engage with clients when I get the first introduction to a client. How do I basically pitch my services? Sometimes,
Mhm.
again, it starts off with listening to the client, understanding what is their problem, and then figuring out, am I the right person to basically for this job? And can I basically sell myself to them? And here comes experimentation because you learn over time and you have to try out different versions. I tried where I basically create a little script of questions that works pretty well because it gives me structure, but sometimes it nails me too much down to the questions.
Mm.
Sometimes I figure out that I'm maybe not the person that always follows the questions. I'm a very talkative person. I like to also understand the client because the best clients personally for me are the ones that I can really build up a really personal relationship with them. And over time, I get to know about even their families and so on. So that's one of my, let's say, preferred type of client. But all this evolves through your experimentation on how do I set myself up with this corporate facade? Do I want to be super serious with them because I want to show them that I'm really professional? And that's one way. And another way that basically I'm recently exploring over the last few months now is, for example, I've been a parent now for almost 2 years. And so the last year, I've done a lot of projects based on on a project basis. So every time there's a client, they have a specific need, I come on board, I solve it. But now I'm not interested in that anymore because it's also kind of there's this pressure of always reactivating older clients, getting new clients, and now I want to slow things down because I want to spend more time with the family. I want to have a bit more stable income, but I still want to enjoy this freelancing life. So now what I'm currently experimenting and trying out is what I call the subscription model. And I've seen this already a few years ago that some of the graphic design agencies, some of them very small ones, they are doing this where you basically say, pay me as one fee and I'll work as much for you as possible, with some specific
Right.
restrictions. And similar to that, I now start doing this with data. Yeah. So when I'm testing this out now, of course, there comes much more into it when I always tell this to friends and other people. They always say like things, yeah, but how can you make sure that people don't take advantage of your time,
Mm.
and or that you're just working too much on one client? I mean, there are always limits, but the most important part at the end comes down is who is your client and how did you pick them? And I think this subscription-based model works very well with a very specific type of client. So you have to over time learn your niche and the type of client you want to work with. Yes, so yes. But that's
Very.
something that you always experiment. It's the type of how you communicate. It's the type of how you basically want them to pay you. There are tons of experimentation. So yeah, I never stop. There's
Yeah.
always something to learn.
Yeah, tidbits like this that are part of your course, because it's more than just the course itself, from my understanding, right? You
Yeah,
have all these events that you're putting together as well for the members, for the
yeah,
students that you're embarking in their freelancing career. Lots of resources, even a job board, right?
yeah.
And yeah, many more guides and other stuff.
Especially the events. At the end, it sounds selfish, but I think that's probably how most people that build something, they try to scratch their own itch. And
Hmm.
I always enjoyed since I started, because once you're a freelancer, there's no structure. Who should you work with? When should you work with? And everything. And one thing that I always enjoyed was finding people that I found interesting and reaching out to them and ask them for a small chat. The only difference is now where I have this community, I basically make them events. So
Mm.
I basically invite people. So like, hey, I scheduled a call with this person. We're going to talk about this topic. If you want, you can join. I will record it. If you can't make it, you can watch the recording later on. But at the end, I do them for me and I ask the questions, because I'm a freelancer. I want to learn from those people. Sometimes it's about marketing because again, at the end, we are in our little bubble of data.
Right.
I sometimes I can spend too much time on, I don't know, playing with pandas or new Python libraries, but at the end, then I also don't spend time on learning new marketing tricks or
Right.
yeah, educating myself there. So getting people on marketing side, on negotiation side, getting another freelancer that shares their experience and lessons. These are, I think, are the ones that, ongoing education that is so valuable as a
Yeah.
freelancer because
Yeah.
we are in our own little world, in our room, and yeah.
Yeah. Good point. And like you said, we have limited resources and time and we can't be proficient in everything. So having a community that you can learn from each other, yeah, amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dimitri, for being on the Lights on Data show, putting the lights on freelancing for data professionals. I do recommend everybody to check out the datafreelancer.com if you want to take your first step as a freelancer or you're contemplating. And if you don't, maybe check it out. Maybe we'll give you that inspiration to do so. Thank you, Dimitri.
Thank you for having me.